Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day.
There we go. Everything old is new again, starting off in a rather mellow way with Mr. Rogers there. I'm here with the ever childish David Cohen.
Childish?
Yeah, why are you childish?
I mean, childlike?
All right, that'll work. Okay. Childlike sensibilities?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go with that. With the most recent passing of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s New York City Kids show host Chuck McCann, and news that Tom Hanks, have you heard this, has signed for a biopic to play Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
And they're going to try to use and illustrate his transformative power of kindness and respect to heal and unite, which is not a bad idea in this day and age, right? So we've got, perfect opportunity here for Everything Old is New Again in our perspective to review children's TV shows hosted by, drumroll, local, regional kids celebrities of a sort who have been around since the beginning of TV and who will always have a place and be heard in our heart, our kids' hearts, even as we grow older. Do you remember these shows hosted by individual local hosts, right?
They don't do that anymore, do they?
There's a little bit of it, but it's not the way it was. Right.
Right.
So, but this week we've got a special guest who is going to join us on this journey. He's going to take us through the rather unheralded and unappreciated hero of yesteryear, the children's show host. Jeff Stein is joining us. David Cohen, let us know who Jeff is.
Well, Jeff Stein is a national award-winning broadcaster with 35 years of experience in Iowa radio and TV. He's covered every Iowa presidential caucus since 1980 and has been featured as a political analyst on Fox News, PBS NewsHour, and various TV and radio stations in Iowa. Jeff hosts the daily KXEL live and local interview program weekday afternoons between 2 and 4 p.m. Central Time on AM 1540 in the Midwest, and streaming live as well as KXEL.com.
He's also recognized as Iowa's leading broadcast historian. He's the author of 5 books, including 3 on Iowa's broadcasting. His work can be found at www.totallyiowa.com, totallyiowa.com.
And his most recent work is the definitive book on The Floppy Show, which is a children's TV show that was hosted by Duane Ellett back many years, for 30 years, from 57 to 87. He created a high-voiced beagle dog puppet, Floppy. And together they were a staple of weekday afternoons, state fairs, and they still reside in the hearts of baby boomers across America. Welcome, Jeff Stein, if you're still there.
I am, and I need to have you people introduce me every day. That's tremendous.
How about that? We'll do that introduction every time you go to a restaurant with your wife to kind of impress your surroundings.
She has been around this enough. That will not impress her a bit, nor should it, I suppose.
Sounds like my wife. They're not impressed with the when you're so close to talent and to genius, you don't really recognize it. You kind of take it for granted, right?
I don't recognize it at all.
So I want to get right to the point here at this juncture. In terms of the Floppy Show, can you tell us what it meant to you and others that lived in Iowa?
The Floppy Show was on, as you mentioned, for 30 years, and this is the amazing thing. It transcended so many presidential administrations. When Duane Ellett went on the air with the Floppy Show, Dwight Eisenhower was president. At the end of the show's run, it was the end of the Reagan administration. Imagine that period of American history and how everything changed. And yet there was still a guy who taught himself ventriloquism, created a hand puppet, and mesmerized children. And I got involved with this about 10 years ago when the television station WHO-TV in Des Moines asked me if I would preserve what little video and film existed of the show. And so I processed it, digitized it, collected photos, etc., and that led to doing an event at the State Historical Society, put together a 1-hour retrospective on video. And we literally had to add a show. 1,000 people turned out between Christmas and New Year's one year when we set up showings. We had to do it the next year because there was such demand. Now, keep in mind, this is something like 25 years after the show had been off the air, and there was still that warm spot in people's hearts. And that led to additional film festivals. It led to the production of now 4 DVD retrospectives. And I was contacted by a publisher in South Carolina, and folks listening probably know this publisher. It's Arcadia Publishing. They're the folks who do these wonderful historical books with lots of photos, kind of the brown sepia tone covers. They all look very similar in the display. They're from South Carolina. They were talking to booksellers in Iowa and said, well, what title could we produce? What book could we have someone write that you folks would be interested in selling? And they kept hearing, we need a book about Floppy. We need a book about the Floppy Show. They didn't know what a floppy was, and ultimately they contacted me. I explained it. I'm not sure they understand yet, but we now have a book that coincides with the 60th anniversary of the start of the show.
Wow, that's unbelievable. You talk about the politics side of it, or the political side, that there were so many different changes in the world. But if you look through this book, and there's a treasure trove. I mean, there are photographs here, and as I get older, I realize how important photos are, and that you don't take them for granted. They're not just, oh, gee, it's just a photo. These are unique photos that I don't think you can find anywhere on the net other than in your book here. And they process his career and show it, illustrate from the beginning to the end. As you can see, he grows a beard and gets a little gray and so forth. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're a fan of the growth of the history of this particular show, The Floppy Show, or the world in general, it's reflected in your book in some ways. On the other hand, it's not. It was timeless. This little puppet stayed the same, and the attitude of the show seemed to have stayed the same, which was, I guess the best word to describe it would be fun, no?
Absolutely right. And this was also at a time when the FCC later in the run decided, well, these shows should have some educational component. To some degree, that took a lot of the fun out of it. But this goes back to the day when you were just trying to fill 30 or 60 minutes of airtime, and you were just trying to make it fun for kids. And if they learned something about getting along with one another, so be it. But it was about cartoons, it was about shtick, and the thing that was the real hook to this program, Douglas and David, is that Duane and Floppy were in a TV studio, and kids could come and be a part of the show. But they interacted with the puppet. They got to beep his nose if they asked a riddle. But more importantly than that, Duane would be on the road with Floppy up to 200 appearances a year. And so you could be growing up in one of the smaller towns throughout the state of Iowa, and Duane and Floppy might come to your community festival, or they might come to the local theater and do a stage show at Christmas time so that the parents could dump the kids off at the theater and then go shopping without having to worry about the kids. And so they had this direct interaction that transcended a flickering image on the screen, and that is what separated them from so many other cowboys or ship captains or world travelers that might have been the protagonist in a different TV kids show.
Right. We had Officer Bolton, Joe Bolton, and Captain Joe McCartney on WPIX Channel 11, or McCarthy.
I thought it was McCarthy.
McCarthy, you're right. And they were sort of fun, but I don't think they had the ambiance, as you just said, the presence, the fun element, the puppet, the kids in studio that the Floppy Show did. And I think that is an important element that was missing for us, that it seems to have caught fire, and the memory of this lasts with the people that live in Iowa to this day, I guess, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because I still get at least 2 to 3 requests a month from someone who will send me an email who will say, "Hi, my name is Douglas. We celebrated my 7th birthday on the Floppy Show. It was on April 12th of 1964. If you could just send me a copy, I'd really appreciate it." Well, there is the assumption, because of how we live today, right? We're always on camera. Camera in the palm of our hands with the phone. There is the presumption that all of these shows exist. And the sad part of it is, most of them were live. so there was never a recording. Even in the days when they videotaped, the bean counters at the TV station, the whole point of videotape was so you could reuse it, right? So they'd videotape the show and record over it. And so there are precious few copies of full shows available. And unfortunately, I have to ruin people's dreams. I did it just the other day, literally, where somebody wanted a copy of the show because Duane had said hello to her dad when he was a little kid and in the hospital, and they thought that would be a wonderful thing, and it would. But sadly, I'm glad he got to see it live because there's no video or film recollection of it.
And, well, I'll tell you, the next best thing is to go to totallyiowa.com, totallyio.com, to get The Floppy Show by Jeff Stein. You'll take a ride down memory lane, and the trip is worth the price of admission. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New again to continue with Jeff Stein and talking The Floppy Show and all things children's shows.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Can you believe this, boys and girls? We actually have Batman here with us today. What were you talking about, Batman?
I know it's rude, but we were talking about Floppy.
You were?
Yes.
Hey, what were you saying?
Behind his ear. Well, I was just asking what kind of a dog he is. We have a pet dog in the Batcave.
You do have?
Yes.
Floppy is a, what we call a bugle.
Yes.
Combination beagle and loudmouth, which boils down to bugle, you see.
Oh.
Isn't that novel?
Yes, it is.
There we go. You hear a little piece of The Floppy Show there here on Everything Old is New Again.
It didn't have a laugh track, did it?
Well, there were kids in the audience there that could have laughed if something was funny. Yes.
I guess the voices were too tiny to hear.
Long story short, we're here with Jeff Stein, the author of The Floppy Show, which you can get on totallyiowa.com. We're talking about children's shows. There's a little piece of Adam West, who, of course, is Batman. He was in his full regalia.
Yeah, why? That's pretty impressive to have a guest like that.
He was coming in town. Maybe, Jeff, you know. What was he coming in town for? Do you remember?
Oh, I do. Of course, Batman was on from 1966 to 68, and Adam West did the best he could to break out of that stereotype, but pretty quickly figured out that he was just going to have to live with the persona of Batman. And so by the fall of 1977, he was showing up with the Batmobile in full Batman costume at car shows around the country. And they had one of these car shows at Veterans Memorial Auditorium in downtown Des Moines. And on the Floppy Show, they had a contest, and the kid who won got to ride in the Batmobile, ride shotgun with Batman through the streets of downtown Des Moines. And the kid was then escorted to the TV studio, and that's the segment that you heard. The thing that is why that is so popular is that Adam West had quite a sense of humor that occasionally got a little on the blue side.
Yes.
Duane Ellett loved a good joke and a good pun, and so you're watching this play out as they try to top one another with double entendres and with things that really should not have gotten through the censor. Well, the kids have no idea what's going on. They just see Batman and they see Floppy and they don't get the jokes, and the adults are howling at home. And I've played this for a live audience, and little kids don't get it. The adults are in stitches. And it went so well that Adam West did not show up for the last segment. I think they knew they had pushed their luck just enough, and it's a very popular clip. We put the entire Adam West episode on one of the DVDs. That's available at totallyiowa.com. We also put the show with Bill Cosby on it. That has a different context these days, but the episode with Bill Cosby on The Floppy Show was not only before The Cosby Show, it was before Fat Albert. And so what you're seeing here is Bill Cosby interacting with 4- and 5-year-old kids as he was developing that Saturday morning live-action / animated show for CBS.
Wow, that's unbelievable. The thing is that a little local show, I say little in quotes, with respect to what these stars probably were thinking about the show, and but they were able to experiment a little bit too. It's funny, I did see the Adam West in total. Two things I want to say. First of all, the ride in the Batmobile, the child that was there, I forget his name, Bobby, I think it was saying, indicated that it was not so much fun. It was a very rough ride in the vehicle, and so reality came to the forefront too. It was pretty funny. And the second thing was what you were saying, the double entendre. I was a little bit, I didn't know that that's what they were doing on purpose, but I certainly got it and laughed, but then became a little uncomfortable. And it was an unusual, because I didn't know I don't know this show as a New Yorker, you know? So I was trying to say, is it really innocent and they're just playing this, or they really dive into it? So you just answered that they certainly were aware of what they were doing. If you listen to that clip or watch that clip, you get a kick out of it.
Well, and Duane had this great ability to speak through Floppy and himself to children at their level. He was always seated as he worked with the kids so that they were at eye level, but sometimes he would make an aside to the camera designed for the parents to get the joke. And so he was working at two levels, and that's what makes this so interesting as well. When you watch the show as a kid growing up, you get it at one level. When you're watching these tapes as an adult, you see the real talent that he had because, again, he was working two different rooms, if you will, simultaneously.
Right, at the same time. Now, this is awkward, but did anyone ever come up to you or in your experience say, I remember, for example, the Batman interview as a kid and understanding it one way, but I've just watched it back and I missed all of that, what went on, the double entendre and how fun it was?
I've not had anyone who specifically said that, but you can just tell when, again, there's an audience of people. And the look on their faces, because there's first the recognition that it's Batman, maybe a little recognition that they saw the show, and then they go to this whole different place. And again, you have the greater understanding and appreciation for Duane Ellett's talent.
There you go. And also there's a reference there. I'm going to play it here to another guest that was on the show.
Thank you, Duane. I want to tell you before I leave, if I may, how much Robin and Alfred and I have enjoyed your show in the Batcave.
Yes.
In the afternoons, we normally take that time to dust the Bat computers. And it's nice to see you kids again, too.
Robin was here a year ago on this very program.
Yes, he told me about it for weeks.
And he said that you were kind of bossy at times.
I don't think there's any truth in that.
There you go. So just referencing the fact that Burt Ward apparently was on the show the year before.
Well, you can't get Batman every year for the car show, so I guess you get Robin in some of these alternate years.
Well, we respect that because we've had Burt Ward here, and unfortunately we haven't had the opportunity before he passed away to have Adam West on. So certainly Burt Ward holds a warm place in our heart. But like you say, so he had celebrities, but that wasn't the mainstay of the show, right? What was you think the fascination or why the longevity of this show beyond the fact that there was celebrities on it from time to time?
Well, and that's an excellent point. We have the video of those shows with the celebrities because it was so rare. It was not the regular old show. The regular old show would be Duane and Floppy kibitzing, going back and forth with a little bit of patter. They'd introduce a cartoon. Then if it was your birthday, you got to ask Floppy a riddle. And Floppy would never know the answer. What's the biggest pencil in the world? Pennsylvania. Why did the man throw the clock out of the window? He wanted to see time fly. You know, the same riddles every single day. And it was tremendous because the kid would ask the riddle, Floppy would say, I don't know. And the kid would think, oh my gosh, I got to stump Floppy with a riddle. Right. And then they'd get a goodie sack with potato chips and soda pop and other things to get them all jazzed up on sugar for the drive home. Right. And so it was the innocence of all of these kids interacting with the puppet and the look on their faces. Because, again, everybody has to understand, this is before cable TV, this is before Nickelodeon, this is before so many things. And at a time when every local station, as you've mentioned, they had a kids show, this was the little kids' hero. This was, this is where they celebrated their birthdays, the Cub Scout troop would go, and even college students. There were groups of college students who would get out of class, watch the Floppy Show before they'd go to dinner, just as kind of a de-stress sort of thing. And there were floppy fan clubs on college campuses as a result. It was just an amazing thing.
Well, I can imagine also then, if you really think about it, they grew up watching the show, then they're on their way to high school, then they're on their way to college. The show is still on, especially in college. It's on at a time when they probably don't have a class or can schedule classes around it. So it's bringing their childhood along with them along their ride. And like I say, it was on 30 years, so if you were lucky enough to be young enough, you may have been able to bring your childhood with you, so to speak, by watching that show for 30 years. It's amazing.
Absolutely correct. And that's the thing where, of all the things that changed from the late 50s through the 60s, 70s, through most of the 80s, that was the constant. And sometimes Duane was wearing a leisure suit, or as you mentioned, he might have had a beard, or he didn't have a beard. Floppy, the only change to Floppy in 30 years was midway through.
Wait, I'm going to guess. I'm going to tell you. I know it. A red sweater.
Duane's mother-in-law knitted Floppy a sweater. And so instead of this dog puppet with a tan felt body, all of a sudden here was this bright red sweater. And that's helped me, actually, in trying to date video clips or photos, because I look to see, okay, sweater, not sweater, because that's the part where Floppy... Because also, they did that because the show was starting to be broadcast in color on a regular basis. And so a red sweater helped sell the fact that it was in color as opposed to a drab tan puppet. It was all about the showmanship.
And Floppy's always carrying a bone, which was white, so the contrast and all of Shore came alive as well. So we're talking with Jeff Stein. If you want to take a look at this book and buy it, it's well worth it. You can get, I think, an autographed copy too, right, at totallyiowa.com?
If you order it, I have autographed some, and if you need it personalized, just put that note in the order, and the other books that I've written on this topic are there as well at totallyiowa.com. Yes, sir.
Sounds good. So totallyiowa.com, go and get The Floppy Show. I'm telling you, take a ride down memory lane. It's worth the price of admission. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again to continue talking children's entertainment, The Floppy Show, and more on Everything Old is New Again.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
You've never heard of Bozo the Clown?
No.
How could you not know who Bozo the Clown is?
I don't know, I just don't.
How can you call yourself a clown and not know who Bozo is?
I don't know who Bozo is. What, is he a clown?
What, is he a clown? What, are you kidding me?
Well, what is he?
Yes, he's a clown.
All right, so what's the big deal? There's millions of clowns.
All right, just forget it.
Forget me? You should forget it. You're living in the past, man. You hung up on some clown from the 60s, man.
And welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. David Cohen, do you recognize the voices we just heard?
Well, that was George.
There are actually three, so go ahead.
George Costanza.
Yes.
Right? And then it was John Favreau as, I forget what the clown's name was on that
Eric.
Seinfeld. Eric. On the Seinfeld episode.
He's, of course, was the director of Swingers and Iron Man. Actually, he was in Swingers and director of Iron Man, right?
Sure, yeah.
If you know that. And the last little bit there, Jeff, I bet you recognize, maybe you didn't, that little laugh at the end. What was that?
That was Floppy. And it's an amazing thing because Duane Ellett taught himself ventriloquism for this puppet, for this gig. And he was able to have full-throated laughter through the puppet. I don't know how to do that. That's why he was Duane of Duane and Floppy, and I'm not. That's why I'm here with you.
There we are, and we're talking to Jeff Stein, author, historian, broadcaster. His latest work is The Floppy Show, and you can go to totallyiowa.com to pick that up. I'll tell you, that laugh is so good. You're telling me that was supposed to be from the puppet, and again, I'm not educated, I'm not familiar with this, and I'm enjoying learning about Floppy, and it's going to make me. I've read the book, and I love the book. It's a great read, some great pictures, and even if you have no idea what we're talking about in terms of this show, you go to YouTube and you can pick up some clips there. You read this book, and it places you right there. It's like time traveling, but the other side of the fence is this business about the laugh. I didn't know that was supposed to be Floppy. I thought that was Duane Ellett himself.
Oh no, that is Floppy, and it's an amazing thing because. As I said, Duane taught himself ventriloquism. The way this whole thing came about was they were doing a program with the Animal Rescue League folks, and Duane was a staff announcer. He was a talented singer. He did talk shows. He was a disc jockey, and then when the radio station added TV in the mid-'50s, they added a show about lost pets. And the head of the Rescue League said, we need to do something to help teach children how to take care of pets. And that was the suggestion, and Duane went home and built Floppy. He was an amateur wood carver, so he carved Floppy out of balsa wood and created this character. And they started bringing kids in. And it wasn't working because Floppy was not the original name for the puppet. For this Animal Rescue League show, his name was Mr. Dog. Terribly original. There had to be a focus group associated with this. Mr. Dog. And the problem was the kids were a little put off by Mr. Dog. They needed something they could relate to. And so one of the kids just one day said, "Oh, he's so cute, he has those floppy ears." And literally, Mr. Dog became Floppy, and the rest is truly history.
See, that reminds me of a couple of characters we know that the names aren't exact original of Barbecue Guy and the Fondue Guy that appear on our show once in a while.
The utilitarian, they do the job, right? They describe who those people are.
When I listen and I hear Barbecue Guy's going to be on, I know what I'm going to get. So again, it does the job.
It's true. It doesn't describe him entirely physically, but it describes other things.
I think it does.
It might. It's true.
Well, I mean, when you picture Barbecue Guy, I picture some, schlubby guy that talks just the way he talks.
Yeah, you'd picture me. So listen, we'll go back.
Oh, come on now.
Speaking a little bit more about the genre in general, I remember shows like this that seemed to be, and I'm going to call them national, back in the day, they would create, I'm going to talk about Bozo first, like a number of Bozos in a number of different areas. So, it was one Bozo in New York, another one in Boston, another one in Iowa. David, you're laughing.
I'm laughing because Bozo has become such a generic, it's like Kleenex for tissue. Bozo is just, isn't that guy a Bozo? Look at that Bozo over there.
Let's listen to a piece of Bozo, and we could talk a little bit about, the idea of how these shows were bandied about during the day.
Wowee, kazowie, Bozo's kind of excited because these packages arrived for Clank's special delivery. The mailman delivered it here to the Bozo Big Top, and I'm just dying to see what's inside. I hope he'll stop by and visit with us pretty soon because the suspense is killing me.
He's just got the level of excitement and enthusiasm that Bozo presented. If you remember Bozo with the hair, the red hair, and so forth, it's distinctive, and they had toy giveaways and a treasure chest. There also was like Paul Winchell, if you remember him. There was Wonderama. There was Captain Kangaroo, although that one I think was national. But all of these others were and were not national, where they had imitations in different areas. Now, talking about that, where did Floppy fit in the mix? I mean, there was no way to get that character or that show national at the time, correct?
Right, and there really was no desire to because, again, it worked because you had that interaction with the kids locally. Wonderama was syndicated on the Metro Media TV stations across the country, and yes, Captain Kangaroo was on CBS, but you had, something like the Floppy Show, or in the Quad Cities of Iowa and Illinois, there was the Cartoon Showboat, and it depended on when the show was on the air, what time, whether it was Captain Vern or Captain Ernie, and they were just the steamboat captain showing cartoons. So these local characters had a way of being very personal to that audience. Again, you're on the Mississippi River, you've got a steamboat captain. Floppy in Des Moines, obviously. But when they did Bozo, as you said, this is a template that was created, and then you could have your local Bozo. Romper Room was the same way, right? This was the template. I think the people were in Baltimore. They'd send the lesson plans out, literally, and you had Miss Bonnie here and Miss Kathy here and Miss whoever somewhere else. And it gave a bigger time feel, if you will, than that local show might have otherwise had.
Right. Now, so the question then is, looking back at the Floppy Show, if this gentleman, Duane Ellett, was born 30 years later, let's say, and the same exact show he was trying to promote and perform now, based on the technology and the apparently national nature of even local television, where are we? Would this exist now? Is this a lost art form, or is this something that could come back?
I'm really afraid that it may be lost, and because of the fact that folks of our vintage, and I get asked this by folks of our vintage, they really want to believe that something like this could work today. But I think kids, they have these electronic devices in the palm of their hands so early on. I'm just not sure they are as impressed by a guy in a puppet. But the thing about Duane is, this worked for that period of time. I have no doubt that he would have come up with something that would have spoken to today's kids, and maybe it would have had much more of a video element to it, in terms of being online as opposed to a terrestrial TV show or a cable TV show. I have no doubt about that. He actually he went to school to be a lawyer. He was going to go to law school. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then he took a course in radio, and his life changed. But he also had the foresight, and this is why I think he could have adapted. He had the foresight that they said, devise this character, and he said, okay, but I'm going to own the copyright and trademark to the character. And the station said, fine, whatever. We don't understand. We don't care.
Right.
And so the station owned the shows, but he owned the puppet. And he said, half-jokingly, in interviews, I did that because if they get rid of me, I'm taking the dog with me. And so he owned the character, which meant he could merchandise T-shirts. I mean, he put his kids through college, right? Because he was doing stage shows and selling T-shirts, which were the height of fashion, and it was all separate from the station. So, I think he could have adapted today in a very contemporary way.
Now, there is and was a national show called the Sunny Side Up Show, and I'm going to play a clip here of a young lady named Kelly with Chica, the puppet. So they tried to do this. It lasted for a while. It was somewhat successful. Let me just see if this translates.
For Dress Up Week, woo, you might dress up in different clothes for different weather, like it's sunny, so we might get out our sun hats. Might wear sunglasses. Oh, look at that sun glow.
So, I mean, it's for younger children. It's clearly for younger children, but it reminds me a little bit of the genre in that it was on for 4 or 5 years. It's just been sold, and I'm not sure that they're going to continue the same format, but I think was on exactly the station. I'm not exactly sure what the station was. But anyway, it's one of these cable stations where they play cartoons in between, and there's this educational element where they're always trying to teach something new. We don't have much time, but do you think the education element changed the Floppy Show for the better or worse, or just something else to do?
I think it changed it. Duane thought it was for the worse because it was trying to put too many elements in. And, you had Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. Right. Remember that from the 50s and 60s? Fran Allison from Iowa. So there's something about people from the Midwest and being able to handle kids and puppets, I guess.
There you go. Sensibilities of the Midwest, of course, are important to us as we're enjoying broadcasting in that area on KXEL. And we are Everything Old is New Again. We'll be right back. And we'll just go out with a little bit of a song that you may remember from Wonderama. We'll be right back.
Thank you for being with us on Wonderama. Next week, lots of surprise guests. Until that, parents, you remember this. Not for grown, but we have problems of our own. Kids are people too. Walk-a-doo, walk-a-doo, walk-a-doo.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
One little chair for one of you and a bigger chair for two more. Someone who likes to rock, a rocking chair. Here, now, look up. Way up. And I'll call Rusty. Rusty?
Hi.
Hi, Rusty.
Hi, Friendly.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Good.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. That's the Friendly Giant. David Cohen, do you remember the Friendly Giant? That's obscure as heck.
It sounds familiar, but I don't recall.
It was Bob Holm, I should say, and he was broadcasting from Canada, and that was Rusty the Giraffe, and it was a show called The Friendly Giant on only for 15 minutes from 1953 to 85, but it made its way to Long Island. I remember watching that. He was a big giant, and he would have these little figurines and things and little place to sit, the chairs and rocking chair and whatever, and invite you in. And anyway, that's what we're talking about, is shows like that, sort of with a local touch, children shows that have an adult that are interacting with children, and more specifically, we're talking with Jeff Stein, who is the daily host of KXEL Live and Local, an interview program, weekday afternoons between 2 and 4. On KXEL Central Time, and again, that's 2 to 4 Central Time on 1540 AM, and streaming live as well on KXEL.com. So if you want to hear more from Jeff, just get a KXEL.com, hit play live, listen live, I should say, at 2 to 4, and you can hear the show. And Jeff, have you ever had the opportunity to interview or speak to anyone on your show about the Floppy Show? It's an odd question because you're sort of out of your genre there, but I don't know. It sounds like your listeners would love to hear more about it.
Actually, when the book came out, we had someone else at the station interview me about it because I thought about interviewing myself, and I thought that just got even too self-centered even for me. But you know, we try to talk about the things like you do, where we're talking about this specific show, but people listening right now are imagining their own local children's show host. And when I've gone around talking about broadcasting history, I'll start telling a story, and people in the audience swear that they know how it ends. And I'm talking about something half a country away. But the experiences were so common, and the audience takes all of this to heart. I mean, that's the amazing thing about radio and then television. I'm not sure it's as much the case today, but the audience just own the shows and the performers and the characters, and they just have such a great love for it and great respect for it. And that's what makes this fun to talk about, as you do every week.
Thank you. And that it just lends me to just discuss a little bit, because it's exactly what I'm thinking about in some ways, is that our show, you know, is a contemporary nostalgia or a nostalgic look to the future. As we talk about current things, such as your book, which has just been released, of course, The Floppy Show, you can get on totallyiowa.com, totallyiowa.com. But the idea is, what we see today is always based upon things from the past, and looking at and enjoying a little piece of what we grew up with, and trying to share that no matter what topic we do here on Everything Old is New Again. We hope and think that we're able to appeal to the grandfather, the father, mother, grandmother, and the son and daughter. So generational topics here like this, and certainly kids shows have a little bit, it's a little bit lost there, but kids can still read this book and see all these pictures and enjoy what their mom and dad and maybe granddad enjoyed back in the day.
Absolutely, and I know that when we've done the public film festivals, there would be individuals, baby boomers, let's say, and their parent, who had introduced them to the show when they were a kid, will come along, and the baby boomer's kid comes along. So it's a three-generational thing as they try to pass it along. I was just back doing a talk about this in my hometown, and a woman came up and bought the set of DVDs and said, we have to introduce this to our grandchildren. And it's the kind of thing where it's good, clean, wholesome entertainment, and you don't have to worry about it, and for one generation to share it with another, you know, for Grandpa to watch it with the grandchild. There's just not that much going on out there that replicates it. And it's really any of these kid shows. We just happen to, you know, have some material on this one, but that's another good thing about a program like this that leads people to think of these things. Go see a clip on the internet, the DVDs. It's a good time for that sort of memory making and expanding, because it's no longer just my memory now. It might be a child or a grandchild too.
Right, and we're here on Everything Old is New Again, and we have a home on KXEL, and we're enjoying spending Saturday nights at 4 a.m. and Sunday at 6 p.m. afternoons or evenings with your audience and with KXEL, and we're just having a great time trying to do sort of what you're talking about, to make what the past is come alive, but also acknowledge that the entertainment today has a place, and the past has a place in the entertainment today. And if the people that are listening to us enjoy David and myself, the topic is going to change every week, but it is something that will ring a bell or people have fun or the different characters that we might do, what have you. We're just trying to do that in our little corner of the world, and we're happy to be broadcasting for 4 years now doing that. And we hope to do it for another 40 years. And I think, like you say, it is something that when you've got entertainment that can be generational, people seem to grab onto that because you don't see too much of that out there now, and this floppy show must have been that back in the day. And I guess what you're seeing is all of the baby boomers and people that saw this show are now going to react to this book, and they must have been reacting, saying, you know what, this really is something I may have even forgotten about, but now I'm reigniting my interest in this. No?
Oh, absolutely, and I've had more than one person come up to me at one of the book signings and say, look at page 87, that's me in the picture. I mean, they find themselves in the picture. And we've had the same thing with the film festivals and the DVDs, where people will say, oh my gosh, that's me. I mean, the stars are in alignment on this, but all of this is available, as you've been kind enough to note, at totallyiowa.com. We also have thefloppyshow.com, which has a few of the audio clips and video clips. It tells about it. The DVDs are there at thefloppyshow.com as well. But it really, this shows you, when the puppet was on display at the Historical Museum in Des Moines for about 20 years, they decided, well, we need to recycle the exhibits. And when word came out that Floppy was going to come off of display, there were protests. It made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Jimmy Fallon talked about it on his show wearing a Floppy T-shirt. I mean, it was insane. And Floppy is on display today, by the way, in his hometown of Ankeny, a suburb of Des Moines, at their local historical building. And so people can still go pay homage to the puppy dog.
So now, where did you get all of these pictures from? There's I don't know, you think you said something around 200 pictures in this book. Where'd you get these from?
Well, luckily the television station had a number of pictures. The family had a number of pictures. This was at a time when they took an awful lot of promotional photos, and these were all wonderful 8x10 black and white photos. It was an archivist's dream. And some people have said to me since, well, now you need to do a show about The Magic Window, which was another Central Iowa TV show that was actually on 43 years, and the longest locally produced TV show in the country. And there just aren't that many pictures, because, again, they're television shows, right? And it makes me worry about our future history, because where are the pictures?
Right.
Where will our records be of these things? And so it took a lot of scraping together, but again, they had the presence of mind to have these photos, and there's just not that much left of the genre other than the things we remember and that you've been bringing up today.
And if you want to get them all in one spot, go to totallyiowa.com. It's The Floppy Show by Jeff Stein. It's a great read. It's an interesting read. It's a quick read, but also it's not so quick because you're looking, and you may spend quite a bit of time looking at some of these pictures because they have quite a bit of nostalgia to them, but also there's a lot of interesting topics and things you see in these pictures. Now, finally, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think, therefore, is the legacy of The Floppy Show?
The legacy of The Floppy Show is how a kid can have not so much a hero, but an icon, a favorite, and be mesmerized by something very simple. And these kids get just wide-eyed as they're looking at it, looking at Floppy and interacting. And so the wonder, the imagination, the innocence of kids, that's the legacy. And those kids are now grown-ups, and I literally see them get tears in their eyes when they see Floppy on display or when certain clips are aired in one of these public presentations. It is what a great thing to leave to all of us, and that is something that we owe a debt of gratitude to Duane for.
And I'll tell you, it's so interesting to hear all of this, of a discussion of what I would also say is probably somewhat of a lost art. Like I said before, we'd like to see it come back, but it may not. It's something you need to take a look at and have some fun with totallyiowa.com. Join Jeff Stein on the road to explore The Floppy Show. And thanks, Jeff, for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us on Everything Old is New Again.
Thank you for having me on the program, and thanks for giving us the program on KXCL each week.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us. It's a love fest here, and Everything Old is New Again. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.